And President Trump handed off, he will argue, I'm sure, Tuesday night, an inflation rate of 1.4% in the middle of a pandemic. The majority of jobs lost during the pandemic had come back. We spiked to more than 9%. I mean, 40 years we haven't seen those kinds of numbers.
Correct. And that happened in every single high-income economy because coming out of the pandemic, no country had the supply chains sufficient to be able to withstand the surge in demand. But it is also true that over the last 4 years, inflation has come down faster in the United States than those other countries. GDP has grown at a faster rate than those other countries. And today we are sitting in an economy where anybody who wants a job can get one because we have record low unemployment. Donald Trump is advertising that he is going to bring back the same kind of chaotic economic policies, the same investment in the top 1% in corporations that helped drive our economy into a ditch during his time in office.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
See, this week's already off to a flyer for the Murdoch News Network. First, they cut from their program to the White House press briefing just in time to see Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre shredding Trump's record as president before contrasting it point by point with the Biden-Harris administration.
Just a minute, back to the White House. Jackie Heinrich is now questioning the press secretary.
Questions you would have to ask the campaign, and that is for them to speak to. And what I will say is, what I can say is that as far as contrast, a contrast can't be more clear. It couldn't be more clear. If you think about 4 years ago, America was reeling. It was reeling in a once-in-a-generation pandemic. It was isolated from the world stage. Crime was up. The middle class was sidelined. We saw an insurrection on January 6th in 2021 that the former president led. And you think about today, where we are today, 3.5 years later, we're leading the strongest economy in the world. You hear the comeback stories in places like Milwaukee, to Dayton, to Scranton, Pennsylvania. And so we have done what people said we couldn't do, which is turn the economy around, turn the country around, be a leader on the world stage. And I think it's important for Americans to know and to be reminded where we were and where we are.
And then they hosted Nikki Haley in the hopes that she'd maybe speak to moderate Republicans on the fence, but instead she tore into Trump and JD Vance over their comments towards women.
Why do you think Kamala Harris has a 14-point lead in the gender gap among women?
I think it's because Donald Trump and JD Vance need to change the way they speak about women. You don't need to call Kamala dumb. She didn't get this far, just by accident. She's here. That's what it is. She's a prosecutor. You don't need to go and talk about intelligence or looks or anything else. Just focus on the policies. When you call even a Democrat woman dumb, Republican women get their backs up too.
But none of that compares to the interview that Shannon Bream conducted with Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy.
Let's compare the economic record of Donald Trump against the economic record of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Who thought this was a good idea at Fox? Murphy was invited on to talk about the economic contrast between Trump and Harris. And unlike 98% of those you would find on Fox News, not speaking to you, Jessica Tarlov, he told the truth, perfectly articulating the stark contrast between Kamala Harris, someone who believes corporations should pay their fair share, and the man who believes a 0% corporate rate is fair.
Under this administration, we have seen record job growth in this country. We have manufacturing booming, unemployment at a record low. When Donald Trump left office, we had unemployment at a record high. He told us he was
going to in the middle of the pandemic, to be fair.
We were going to rebuild the manufacturing sector under Donald Trump. We lost manufacturing jobs. So there is a clear contrast between Donald Trump's record as president, where our economy fell to pieces, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden,
of a pandemic,
who have rebuilt the economy and, by the way, driven down inflation at a rate faster than all of our other high-income nation competitors.
But again, President Trump handed off, he will argue, I'm sure, Tuesday night, an inflation rate of 1.4% in the middle of a pandemic. The majority of jobs lost during the pandemic had come back. We spiked to more than 9%. I mean, 40 years we haven't seen those kinds of numbers.
Correct. And that happened in every single high-income economy because coming out of the pandemic, no country had the supply chains sufficient to be able to withstand the surge in demand. But it is also true that over the last 4 years, inflation has come down faster in the United States than those other countries. GDP has grown at a faster rate than those other countries. And today we are sitting in an economy where anybody who wants a job can get one because we have record low unemployment. Donald Trump is advertising that he is going to bring back the same kind of chaotic economic policies, the same investment in the top 1% in corporations that helped drive our economy into a ditch during his time in office.
What he's going to say is poverty was down, home ownership was up, inflation was at 1.4, gas was at 2.30 something a gallon. I mean, he's going to maybe be happy to stand on his policy. And on this issue of inflation and where we go from here, there was a study out this summer from a bunch of folks, including some MIT professors, who said the research shows that mathematically the overwhelming driver of a burst of inflation in 2022 was federal spending, not the supply chain. I mean, I'm no MIT scholar, so I'll defer to them, but he says it was the massive spending that, as I talked about with Senator Cornyn, people on both sides of the aisle voted for under this administration, but there were tough things where the vice president was the tie-breaking vote. She says proudly on the Inflation Reduction Act, which President Biden said this week they shouldn't have named it that, because that's not what it was.
Although, look at the chart. The minute we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, inflation started to decrease at stunning levels in this country. And by the way, that piece of legislation is growing manufacturing jobs all over the country, is cutting prescription drug costs for senior citizens. I'm proud of the fact that we are doing our part to try to clean up the environment. I'm proud of the fact that that legislation finally took on the drug industry and said we're not going to put seniors in a position where they go bankrupt because of their prescription drug costs. Donald Trump was in office for 4 years. He did nothing to take power away from the drug industry. Prescription drug prices skyrocketed under Donald Trump. The Inflation Reduction Act, for the first time, did something about transferring power from the drug industry to regular people. That's the difference between these two candidates. Donald Trump is going to put power in the hands of the big corporations. He's promised the big oil industry that he will do anything they want as long as they donate $1 billion to his reelection campaign. Kamala Harris says that he's going to continue to take power away from the big oil companies, the big drug companies, the big insurance companies, and put that power back in the hands of regular people.
And this comes in the wake of last week's bombshell report that Goldman Sachs, of all people, not exactly the bastions of liberal ideology, believes that the economy would perform better under Harris than Trump, while the former president continues to fearmonger over an impending stock market crash.
Kamala, crash. We're going to have a crash like 1929 if she gets in. It will not be pretty. Thank you.
Those with a very close eye on the ever-changing landscape of Wall Street are warning against Trump, not a stock market crash. Even with said cult leader promising to cut taxes, again for his friends in the 1% club, they think that Harris is better for the economy.
Because you're all people that have a lot of money. I know 20 of you and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay off our debt.
Yeah, totally. We have excellent counters of all political persuasions, but we also do have nonpartisan groups like the Penn Wharton group that put out their budget model and said that Donald Trump would take the deficit 5.8 trillion she'd only add 1.2 trillion. You had Goldman Sachs that came out today and they said that the GDP will significantly decrease under Donald Trump and it'll continue to increase under Kamala Harris. Look at what Moody's has said, also nonpartisan, talking about how if you're going to round up a bunch of immigrants and you're going to have tariffs, which he keeps saying isn't a tax on consumers, and that's what the national tax is that people are talking about. If you're going to implement tariffs, guess what's going to happen? The economy is going to suffer for it. That's not what Kamala Harris is proposing in the American public.
I'm going to steal 30 seconds for Brian.
And with the debate fast approaching, I'm eager to see how Kamala Harris will go after Trump on the economy, considering how it's still an area that a large portion of Americans prefer Trump handling. But as I'd like to reiterate, and Michelle Obama and most recently Joe Biden pointed out, not everyone is granted the luxury of failing upwards. Not everyone is afforded the affirmative action of generational wealth.
He understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth. If we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No. We don't get to change the rules so we always win. If we see a mountain in front of us, we don't expect there to be an escalator waiting to take us to the top. No. We to work. In America, we do something.
I wonder whether he has any notion what a hard day's work is. I mean, all he did was lose his father's money. And then get in trouble and have to owe a lot of other people money. And then borrow a lot of money and give tax cuts to the super wealthy and end up with the largest debt any president's left behind in 4 years. He has an incredible record. An incredible record.
Kamala Harris was not gifted hundreds of millions of dollars to bankrupt her way to a business that finally worked. She had to actually work to support herself and understands what that means to everyday Americans.
Will you vote in the presidential election?
Yes.
Yes. Can I ask who you'll vote for?
Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Were you Democrats before, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Lifelong? Yeah.
I'm a Republican.
You're a Republican? And you're going the other way?
Yes.
Why?
Because she behaves more like a human.
Aside from the fracking issue?
Yes. Yeah.
But yet we're supposed to believe that the billionaire tweeting from the golden toilet in the penthouse is salt of the earth? Come on.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.